Thank you. Did anybody recognize that song? Anybody? Yeah, well, I wrote that last night. Actually, that's the song by Mr. Phil Kagi, and it's on the Nature album, I think it's called. So anyway, I chose that piece of music particularly to show off this guitar because it has some really interesting use of the chords with a lot of open notes and high fretted notes. And what that tends to do is kind of show off the tuning stability of this particular guitar. Now, this is our new 812 CE Deluxe 14 fret V class. Now, for those of us that follow Taylor a lot, you'll know that in 2018, we introduced a whole new way of bracing guitars called V-Class or V-Brace. And it's a whole brand new sonic engine that we use. And we did it in our Grand Auditorium guitars, and those are the guitars that end in a 4. So like 814, K14, K24. And then this year in January at the NAMM show, we introduced the V-Class bracing now in our Grand Concert size guitars, which is anything that ends in a 2. So this particular one being an 812, okay. So what I'd like to do, if it's okay with everybody, is I want to kind of revisit what V-Class bracing and what V-Class is all about. So if we're going to do that, we have to do something a little bit different, and we've kind of got to go back in time a little bit. And if I were to say to some of you, and I'm scanning some ages here, so we'll see how good you are. If I say we're going to get into Sherman and Peabody's Wayback Machine and go back to 1916, who knows what I'm talking about? Thank you. For those of you that don't, go home, watch Rocky and Bullwinkle, and your life will be forever changed, I promise you. But if we go back in time to like 1916, and you know, they had some really marvelous PA systems and microphones back then. Is anybody, you know, that's where you test to see if anybody's listening, because they go, oh yeah, okay. So no PA systems, no microphones. The rock band of the day was a banjo mandolin band, right? So you wanted to be a rock star, you played banjo or mandolin, and you had about 5 or 6 banjo players, about 10 mandolin players, and you know, you had a band. Number 1 hit song in like 1921 was Oh Susanna. All right, so you can kind of see what's happening. So do we have any banjo players in the room? Okay, good. We can make some fun of banjo players. Okay. So are you a banjo player? Banjo player? Yeah. Oh, okay. Well, I'll talk slower. It's okay. I promised I would. Oh, wait, I'm Facebook Live, right? I can't tell banjo jokes. Okay. I'm sorry. I won't tell any banjo jokes. So there was a gentleman that wanted to play guitar in one of these banjo mandolin bands, but you have to understand, and you have to think about things differently. There was no PA systems, there was no microphones. The guitars of the day were a parlor-sized guitar, and they were strung with nylon strings, so you couldn't hear them. So a banjo player wanted to have a guitar that would have steel strings so it could be heard, so he went to our friends at Martin. Martin designed a larger body guitar that had bracing, X-bracing, that was good enough to hold steel strings so you could hear the guitar, and that guitar was called a dreadnought. All right, and dreadnought means? Battleship, right. So that's the guitar that won the war against the mandolins, right? Okay. So now we have this guitar. So now we're going to come back forward and everything, and this was the sonic engine since 1916. Now, for those of you that can do math, you know, in your head, it's 102 years ago. Now, in 2018, we came out with a new way of bracing a guitar. This is something that is totally, totally new. So you have to understand that Bob Taylor and Andy Powers, Andy who is our master luthier, we took a huge step forward in what we're going to do. And I got to give Bob and Andy so much credit, and the whole other team that helped design this, because we made the decision that we're going forward with this. We're not going backward. We're not retreating, because we found a way to build a guitar that's unbelievably different. And here's why it's different. Whenever you build a guitar, an acoustic guitar, let me kind of give you just a little bit of terminology. It won't be boring, I promise. You know, an acoustic guitar is basically a guitar that does not need an amplifier. It has an amplifier, where an electric guitar is a guitar that needs an amplifier. So we have this guitar, this instrument that strings enact the top, and you know, blah 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 blah, and all that stuff that we know. But the top of an acoustic guitar is like its volume control, and the back and the sides of a guitar are like its tone controls. So different woods will respond differently to the input of the strings to the top and create a different tone. Some people would call that maybe the timbre of the instrument. You know, someone taught me that word the other day, and I just like, I'm finally getting to use it. And you know, the timbre of the instrument, it's flavor. It gives it its flavor. One of the guys that I work with calls it, you know, everybody makes chili different, you know, but it's still chili, right? Just different ingredients, maybe different pinches and stuff, and everything comes out different. So V-class, the way that it's different is that instead of crossing the guitar this way and cutting it into quadrants, the V-class comes down this way, because whenever you build an acoustic guitar, it is always a seesaw. And on one end of the seesaw is volume, and on the other end of the seesaw is sustain. Think about it like our friends, the banjo player. Banjos are loud, right? But they have zippity-doo-dah when it comes to sustain. The note happens and it's gone, all right? But an electric guitar, like one I'm going to show you here in a little bit, that thing will sustain for a long time, but you can't hear it. You have to amplify it. And that's because it's built differently. And what ends up happening is the strength of an instrument down the center is going to give it sustain. So V-class builds all of the strength of the instrument right down the middle. We now have sustain. And because the braces aren't going this way, this allows the sides of the guitar to move almost like a seesaw and create a larger volume. Now, when I say the word volume, I want to be really careful here, because some people will play this instrument and they'll say, you know, that's not any really louder than other guitars I've heard. And what we're really talking about is projection. And where projection differs than volume is that if you've ever gone to a concert recently, you know, they don't have the good old stacks of PAs like the good old days when we went and saw Iron Butterfly and Deep Purple, right? They have these wonderful arrays that hang up. And the sound that comes out of that it hits you the same way that it hits you and it hits you. It has the projection and it pushes that volume out. Well, that's what this guitar does. Theoretically, with V-class, it is the same volume for you, and you, and you. And it just pushes it differently, okay? So what's interesting is that we didn't just come up, and by we, whenever I say the words we, I mean Andy and Bob. I had nothing to do with any of this that what I'm talking to you about, okay? I'd love to admit that I did, but I did not. When I came up with this idea of V-class, just want to see if you were listening again. I will test you. This wasn't something we came up with in like June of last year and decided to just change everything. Andy had come up with this, I want to say clear back in 2010, and built one of his first guitars then on this idea. He's always drawing things out and figuring it out. I could tell you the whole story about water moving and all this. Let's just suffice it to say that what ended up happening was the advent of 8 years later coming out with it in mass with the Grand Auditorium. Now there's something that happened. I've already told you about the sustain. I've already talked to you about the volume and the projection. But something else happened with the guitar. And what happened with the guitar that we didn't know was going to happen was that intonation became better. Now, for those of us that play electric guitar, you're thinking intonation of changing the length of a string so that the guitar plays in tune with itself, right? So Les Paul players, Strat players, Tele players, are they all in the room? Some of us, okay? So, but intonation really isn't a mechanical thing. Intonation is in tuneness. That's what the word actually means. So if you're a vocalist, you know, to hit a perfect note, you don't surgically alter your vocal cord size. You learn how to use your mouth and create a perfect note, right? Okay. So what we found out was that there were some things going on inside the box that were kind of kicking out some different frequencies and different notes, so some of those weren't coming out correct. Now, there's going to be the non-believers. So let me try to take you away from the dark side and come with me, and we'll figure this out. For those of us that play guitar and have played for a while, you get your clip-on tuner and you tune your guitar. And everything is wonderful and the world is a wonderful place to be. But then you play an E chord and you go, well, that sounds pretty good. And you would play an A chord and they would sound pretty good. But then you would play a D chord, and what would happen? Come on, it's okay, we're all friends. The G string and the B string, ever so slight adjustments. I'm seeing the heads nod, okay? Ever so slight. Well, guess what? Not anymore. The biggest culprit was this chord. You all remember that chord from page 7 of the Mel Bay primer? That's a G chord. G, B, D, G, B, G. Okay. But that's not the way we played it. Do you know why? Because in the back of our minds, we said, this chord doesn't work. It's going to be, those B notes are going to be flat. So what do? We played this. Well, guess what? That's not a G chord. That's a G5. That's a power chord. We make fun of the metal guys because they play power chords, just 2 notes, but that's what we were doing to compensate for that intonation. Well, now we don't have to do it anymore. So you can do all those wonderful... And you can even come up leaving open strings and play the solo. I can see the tears flowing. It's okay. It's all right. Come on, it's all right. It's all right. You can do that. It's okay. All right. So you can do all those things, and even all these dissonant. It sounds perfect. You can even do a 4.5 octave stretch, and almost do a mandolin sort of thing. So you can do, and not worry until you're droning this. You can even drop D it and do things that way. So that is the reintroduction of V-class. I spent a little extra time on that, but I really wanted you to understand what this sonic engine is all about.